What happens when one of Hollywood's most adored actresses sits down for what should have been a warm, friendly interview, only to be blindsided by a barrage of humiliating, wildly inappropriate questions? In just 34 seconds, a well-known daytime host would shatter her own credibility with remarks so shocking that the entire studio audience would gasp in disbelief. It began like any other cheerful morning broadcast. Cameras rolled. The crowd settled into their seats. The panel of hosts smiled behind their desk, ready for an easy conversation. Kate Winslet stepped onto the stage with her signature grace, waving to the audience as applause filled the studio. She wore a simple blue dress, her smile bright and sincere. This was meant to be a light, uplifting chat about her latest film. Nothing intense, nothing controversial. At the center of the panel sat Denise Welch, flanked by her co-hosts, all seemingly thrilled to welcome such a celebrated guest. Kate took her seat as Denise leaned in with a polite smile, though there was something sharper lurking in her eyes. "Kate, lovely to have you here," Denise began, and the audience applauded again. Kate thanked them warmly, settling in. For a few harmless minutes, the conversation flowed. Small talk about the weather, her trip to the studio, and the joy of sharing new work. But then, with a subtle shift of posture and tone, everything changed. "So, Kate," Denise said, leaning even farther forward, "I have to ask, you've been in this business for decades now. Do you ever feel like you're past your prime? Like maybe it's time to step aside for younger actresses?" The room froze. The co-host stiffened. Kate's smile wavered for a heartbeat before she composed herself. "I believe there's space for everyone in this industry," Kate replied gracefully. "Talent doesn't have an expiration date, and I'm grateful to still be doing what I love." It was poised, classy, unshakable. But Denise wasn't done. "Right, but let's be honest," she pushed on. "Hollywood worships youth. You're what? Almost 50 now. Don't you think audiences want fresher faces instead of the same ones we've been watching for years?" A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. One co-host quickly jumped in, praising Kate's career, but Denise waved her off. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," she scoffed. Kate's expression cooled, her posture lifting. "With respect, Denise, I don't believe everyone is thinking that," she said, her tone steady. "And reducing women to their age is exactly the kind of outdated thinking we should be leaving behind." The audience broke into applause, but Denise's irritation flashed across her face. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive," she snapped. "Not everyone tiptoes around being politically correct." Kate inhaled slowly, keeping her composure. "There's a difference between political correctness and basic respect," she replied. "I came here to discuss my work, not to be told I'm too old to do it." "Well, maybe if you can't handle honest questions, you shouldn't be doing interviews," Denise fired back. The room's energy turned ice cold. Cameras kept rolling. Co-hosts stared in disbelief. One tried to pivot to Kate's new film, and for a brief moment, the tone softened, until Denise cut her off again, accusing Kate of clinging to relevance and calling her career desperate. The studio fell silent. The hosts froze. Even the camera operators looked stunned. Kate's face flushed with anger. "Excuse me?" she said, voice low. "You heard me?" Denise pressed, almost gleeful now, continuing her tirade about older actresses who can't accept their time is over. Another host stood up, outraged, but Denise ignored everyone, locking eyes with Kate. "I'm just telling the truth. Hollywood has a shelf life for women, and you've passed yours." Kate sat perfectly still. The audience didn't make a sound. Everyone waited to see what she would do next. When Kate finally spoke, her voice was steady and unwavering. "I have spent my entire career fighting to be taken seriously as an actress," she said, And I have fought against this exact kind of reductive, ageist, sexist garbage. I did not come here today to be insulted by someone who made her name tearing other women down. The audience exploded in applause. Some even rose to their feet, but Denise's face flushed crimson. "How dare you?" she snapped. "This is my show. You're a guest. You will show me respect." Kate let out a shocked, humorless laugh. "Respect? You've done nothing but demean me since I sat down. You questioned my relevance, my career, my age. And now you want respect? If you don't like it, you can leave." Denise shot back coldly. "You know what? I think I will," Kate said, rising from her chair. She calmly unclipped her microphone. "Because I don't need to sit here and absorb abuse. And frankly, your viewers deserve better than a host who thinks humiliating her guests makes good television." Denise's chair screeched against the floor as she stood too. "Fine, go. We don't need you here." Kate turned, voice cool as steel. "Actually, Denise, I think you'll find that you do. Because without guests willing to sit in this chair, you have no show. And after today, who on earth would want to?" The other hosts rushed in, hands out, whispering pleas for calm. But the damage was already irreversible. "Security!" Denise shrieked. "Now get her out of here!" The audience booed loudly. People shouted support for Kate, insisting she deserved better. Kate gathered her things without haste, head high. "I don't need security to escort me out," she said firmly. "I'm perfectly capable of walking off a show that has lost its soul." She turned to leave, but one co-host gently caught her arm. "Kate, please. We are so sorry. This isn't what we wanted." Kate's features softened at the sincerity. "I know," she said quietly. "This isn't on you. But I can't stay. Not after this." Behind them, Denise continued shouting, her voice shrill and unraveling. "This is unbelievable. The disrespect, the nerve." Kate stepped to the edge of the stage and stopped. Slowly, she turned back. The entire studio went silent again. Cameras still rolling, every eye locked on her. "Denise," she said, and something in her tone made even Denise stop. "I've been in this industry long enough to recognize insecurity when I see it. Whatever is driving your hostility, whatever makes you lash out at women who came here in good faith, I genuinely hope you heal from it. Because this," she gestured at the chaos surrounding them, "this isn't strength. It's just sad." And with that, Kate Winslet walked off the stage. The audience rose to their feet, applauding and cheering as she vanished through the exit tunnel. The cameras cut back to the panel. The co-hosts were speechless, shell-shocked. Denise stood alone, her expression twisted with anger, and maybe something else, something that looked uncomfortably like shame. "Well," one co-host said weakly, desperate to regain control, "we'll be right back after a short break." But the show was already ruined. In every way that mattered, it was over. What should have been a simple, pleasant interview had devolved into a full-blown televised implosion. Kate had remained composed, dignified, and principled. Denise had exposed herself as petty, cruel, and completely out of line. The studio descended into chaos. Producers scrambled in hushed panic. Audience members buzzed, furious and stunned by what they'd witnessed. The remaining hosts huddled together, whispering urgently. Denise stood off to the side, arms crossed, clinging to a defiant pose that no longer convinced anyone, not even herself. A frazzled producer hurried to the desk. "We're going to a pre-recorded segment," he said. "Then we have to decide how to address this." "Address what?" Denise barked. "She walked off my show. She should be apologizing to me." The other hosts stared in disbelief. "Denise, are you serious?" one finally said. "You humiliated a world-famous actress on live TV. What did you think would happen?" "I was asking legitimate questions," Denise insisted. "It's called journalism." "That wasn't journalism," another host shot back. "That was just mean. There's no other way to describe it." The producer raised both hands to stop the argument. Enough. We'll deal with this later. Right now, we need to finish the show. But finishing the show was nearly impossible. The tension was suffocating. No one wanted to look at Denise, let alone speak to her. The audience was restless and distracted, and every segment that followed fell flat. The warmth, the chemistry, the spark that usually drove the program, it was gone. Completely. Backstage, Kate quietly gathered her belongings in the dressing room. A timid knock sounded at the door. "Miss Winslet?" a production assistant said softly. I wanted to apologize. A lot of us are horrified by what happened out there. That wasn't okay." Kate glanced up and offered a small, weary smile. "Thank you. That means a great deal." "For what it's worth," the staffer continued, "we did try to warn them the questions were getting too personal. But, well, you saw?" Kate nodded. "I did, and I appreciate you trying. But I think it's best if I go now." And with that, Kate Winslet walked out of the building with her head held high. She had arrived to promote her work and connect with viewers. Instead, she had been ambushed with unprofessional, ageist insults from someone who should have known better. But she never lost her composure. She walked away the same way she walked in, graceful, self-possessed, and strong. Meanwhile, the show limped toward its conclusion. When the cameras finally cut, the remaining hosts turned on Denise at once. "What were you thinking?" one demanded. "Oh, please," Denise scoffed, though her voice had lost its earlier bravado. "People will forget all about this by tomorrow." But they wouldn't. Everyone in that studio knew it. In that moment, Denise Welch had crossed a line she could never uncross. What should have been a celebration of talent had turned into a spectacle of hostility and ego. And through it all, Kate Winslet, by refusing to be diminished, reminded everyone why she was one of the most respected artists in the world. The interview that was supposed to last 30 minutes imploded in barely 10. What began as passive-aggressive jabs escalated into open disrespect. Kate tried again and again to steer the conversation back to her work. She gave Denise multiple outs, multiple chances to reset, to recover, to be gracious. Denise chose not to take a single one. The contrast between the two women could not have been more striking. Kate, poised, thoughtful, focused on her craft. Denise, frantic for drama, willing to humiliate another woman for a headline. One had built her legacy on talent and dedication. The other seemed determined to build hers on controversy and cruelty. And in the end, only one of them walked away with dignity intact. Kate refused to scream. She refused to retaliate. She refused to sling personal attacks. Instead, she drew a boundary, called out the behavior, and removed herself from a toxic situation. It was, quite simply, a masterclass in how grace defeats hostility. The audience had made its judgment instantly. From the moment Denise crossed the line, the room shifted. They applauded Kate, supported her exit, and made their disgust with Denise crystal clear. It wasn't subtle. It was a full rejection. What Denise failed to understand was simple. Authenticity matters. Audiences can smell cruelty. They know when someone is being cornered or baited. They know when a line has been crossed. And they do not side with the bully, no matter who holds the microphone. Kate's final words cut deeper than any shouting match ever could. By calmly naming the insecurity driving the attack, and by expressing hope instead of anger, Kate claimed the moral high ground so completely that there was no coming back from it. The show wanted a memorable interview, and they got one, but not the kind anyone hoped for. Instead of celebrating Kate's film, they created a cautionary tale about what happens when professionalism is abandoned for spectacle. Everyone on that stage had a choice in those 10 minutes. Kate chose dignity. Kate chose boundaries. Kate chose to walk away from poison instead of swallowing it. Denise chose drama. Denise chose ego. Denise chose cruelty, and exposed herself in the process. The other hosts had tried to save the moment, But once Denise committed to the attack, nothing could stop the collision. For Kate Winslet, it was just another challenge in a long career filled with them. She had faced demanding directors, brutal roles, intense scrutiny, and the weight of fame, all while protecting her craft, her integrity, and her humanity. A hostile talk show host was hardly enough to break her. But for Denise, this moment would become a turning point she never saw coming. Every future interview, every future guest appearance would now carry a shadow. Viewers, actors, publicists, all of them would ask the same silent question. If I sit on that couch, will I be next? Trust once fractured doesn't mend easily. And the trust required to make good television had shattered on live air. Rebuilding it would be an exhausting, uphill climb. The brutal truth about live TV is simple. There are no retakes, no editors to soften the blow. Once a moment detonates, it exists forever. And this moment, this spectacular collapse of professionalism and decency, would linger. It would be replayed, dissected, memified, and slowed down frame by frame. Every smirk, every jab, every uncomfortable silence would live on in permanent circulation. Kate had walked onto that set as a guest, expecting the bare minimum of respect that any working professional deserves. She came prepared to laugh, to share stories, to entertain. She arrived ready to give the audience something warm, something human. Instead, she found herself having to defend her right to exist in the very craft she had devoted her life to. The age comments, the digs about relevance, the insinuations of desperation. These weren't just rude. They were part of a broader, uglier pattern. A pattern women in Hollywood know too well, because no one tells aging men to step aside. No one sneers at a 50-year-old male lead and calls him pathetic for still working. But women, especially those past 40, are forced to justify their presence again and again. Kate wasn't just responding for herself. She was pushing back against an entire mindset, and the audience felt it. When she spoke about fighting to be taken seriously, when she called out reductive sexist nonsense, she wasn't just speaking her truth. She was speaking for thousands. Meanwhile, Denise's defense, her insistence that she was just being honest and saying what everyone was thinking, rang hollow. Honesty without empathy is not insight, it's cruelty. And the audience instinctively knew the difference. They did not reward Denise's boldness. They rewarded Kate's refusal to accept humiliation as part of doing her job. The moment Kate unclipped her microphone was the turning point. It was quiet, controlled, devastating. She didn't storm off. She didn't explode. She simply chose to withdraw her presence. And that choice carried more power than any outburst ever could. Denise's frantic call for security only exposed her further. Instead of de-escalating, she escalated. Instead of self-reflection, she doubled down. And in doing so, she revealed the truth. This was never about journalism. It was about ego. The cameras captured everything, every flicker of anger, every attempt to salvage the unsalvageable. The crew had no blueprint, no crisis manual for host publicly attacks A-list guest on air. All they could do was keep filming as the show unraveled in real time. The co-host who reached for Kate's arm, apologizing, mortified, became a reminder of what the show could have been. Welcoming, human, decent. But it was too late. Kate's final observation about insecurity landed like a blade. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. Confident people don't destroy others. Confident hosts don't belittle their guests. And when Kate stepped through that exit, she took something with her. The last scraps of credibility the show still possessed. The applause that followed wasn't just admiration for her. It was a verdict. The audience had chosen a side, loudly and unmistakably. In the end, what mattered wasn't the spectacle or the soon-to-be viral clip. What mattered was the choice. Faced with humiliation, Kate Winslet chose to stand tall. She chose dignity. She chose to walk away from toxic behavior rather than absorb it. That is the story of what happened when a beloved actress sat down for what should have been a simple interview and instead found herself under attack. It's the story of how grace and professionalism triumph over hostility and manufactured controversy. It's the story of a moment that should never have happened, and a woman who handled it better than